Saturday morning cartoons were awesome. From the 1960s through the 1990s, we kicked off each weekend in a frenzy of animation that is unmatched today.
But were these shows actually any good? Join us as we dig into the history of your favorite and not so favorite Saturday morning cartoons, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of each one, and determine if our nostalgia matches the reality when it comes to these tunes.
So stay in your PJs, grab a bowl of cereal, and settle in. I'm John.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
So John.
Yeah.
When you go to the zoo, I don't know last time you've been to a zoo, but when you go to the zoo, is there an animal that you think, that's where I want to make sure that we swing by this enclosure and see that animal?
Yeah. This will sound suspect, but I love seeing the bears. When I go to a zoo, the polar bears, the grizzly bears, the brown bears, I love seeing the bears.
Well, and I love the tigers.
But
the trick with the tigers is that you're never sure you're going to see them because they kind of hide depending on the enclosures. But I also actually am a big fan of bears,
especially when they're awake.
Yeah, and as long as they're not the depressed ones that are like they're in
just pacing.
Yeah, they're just pacing. You're like, time to move on.
Right.
And hopefully that bear goes. They find a new home for it.
Right.
But of course, the reason we have to talk about zoos and bears, to be suspect, is that today we're talking about Help, It's the Hair Bear Bunch, a 1970s cartoon by Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, it's good to get back to a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, because the Brady kids, I'm still freshly offended by the Brady kids.
Now I'm all upset again. You mentioned them, and now I'm back to surly. But this is going to be an interesting one because... Because normally what we do, we start with a history, and we'll do a history, but Help It's the Hair Bear Bunch does not have an elaborate history to really dig into.
Yeah.
But actually, because it doesn't have a long history, that's kind of where the history lesson is for this one. Because, so we've talked about previously, Hanna-Barbera, they were the Goliath of the Saturday morning cartoons. They, especially through the 70s, most of the hits came through their studio. More than 70% of all cartoons came from their studio through this at one point. And that was on the major networks, of course. So you had three networks to choose from, and Hanna-Barbera basically ruled
all of them
on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
So when you're cranking out that much content, not everything's going to be great.
Yep.
Not everyone's going to be good,
and not everything's going to be A-level effort.
Yeah, and they're not all going to be unique.
Yeah.
We
need to produce some off-brand cartoons.
We need something. Like we need more. We need more. What else? And what's something that we know that if we pitch it, the studio is going to go after? When you're keeping up with the demand from the studios, sometimes you go back to that trusted formula, whether it's a character or a kind of plot device, whatever it is. You go back, and as long as you name check, what the previous one is, the studio's like, oh, like Scooby-Doo, sure, yeah, okay, let's go ahead. We'll order a season of that.
Well, that makes sense.
And I mentioned Scooby-Doo because there's no better example of that. When we talked about when we did the Scooby-Doo episode, there were 11 different Scooby-Doo knockoffs over the course of 10 years from the Hanna-Barbera studio. That's the teen mystery solvers and some kind of goofy sidekick. And there was, every year they did.
That was a
more
formula
than
that worked.
More than every year. And the studios kept buying it. Like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And then it would run a year, and then it would get pitched, and then they threw another one.
Right.
Like, okay, yeah, let's try that. It's kind of like part of it's trying to hit lightning in the bottle, because sometimes when the formula is as good as it is, like Scooby-Doo, it lasts for 50 plus years.
Yeah.
And, maybe it'll work again. In all these cases, it didn't, but, you got to keep trying. So when they would pitch ideas to the networks, all they had to do was say, hey, just remember when we did this? We're going to do that again, but we're going to put it in this situation.
It'll be a little different.
Yeah, but we're gonna put, here's the twist, and then okay, yeah, let's do a 16 episodes or 13 episodes, and we'll put it on for a season, and we'll see where it goes. The real value of those to the studios, like, look, it's keeping our bills paid. Right. The lights are on. We can keep making these, and it gives us more time to work on these unique ideas or something that's develop something different. But we still got to pay all these artists.
It's like small baseball, It's like not every hit one needs to be a home run. Exactly. We need a couple of base hits here and there.
If we can't keep the lights on, it doesn't do us any good to
everything
think
else
big.
Is mute. Yeah.
Yeah. So Help Us the Hair Bear Bunch was one of those reheated formulas. They took their influence from one of Hanna-Barbera's biggest hits from the 1950s, which is Yogi Bear.
Yeah. There's
a bit of Top Cat in there too, kind of like the gang, kind of
right.
A little bit of the streetwise component. But really, this is two bears in Yogi Bear kind of running of Jellystone Park of the Ranger, and here it's three bears running amok in the Wonderland Zoo under the watchful eye of the zookeeper.
Yeah.
Or
and
somewhat watchful. Somewhat watchful eye.
Right.
They have their formula. The CBS says, sure, let's do it. Go ahead. And Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, kind of those Goliaths of the studio, they it's the Hair Bear Bunch together, and it debuts on CBS on September 11th in 1971. So it was originally created with the working title of the Yo-Yo Bears. I don't know why. They'd probably just like, oh, let's just put a name out there.
Sounds too close to Yogi Bear.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, like that was maybe where the name came from.
Probably,
It's just the working title. It was never meant to be the actual final title. So it follows the misadventures of three bears in the Wonderland Zoo, and they regularly sneak out and have various experiences, whether they're going to a concert or it's a get rich quick scheme. And it's all,
or just to get out for a little bit.
Yeah, they just kind of want to do something different. And it's all much to the chagrin of the zookeeper, Eustace Peevly.
Right.
And
who's always under the thumb of the supervisor.
Yeah.
Or superintendent.
The superintendent.
Yeah, he's always afraid of what is the superintendent going to think.
And Peevly is sometimes getting help, sometimes being undercut by his bumbling assistant, Lionel Botch.
Yeah.
Which
is a great name for botch. Someone who's going to botch things up.
He lived up to his name in pursuit of his ever elusive promotion.
Ooh. Do I get a promotion? But we never find out what the promotion is.
No.
He just wants it.
There's threats, I'll promote you out of the zoo, but that's not what he's looking for. But so the dynamic between the bears and the zookeepers, it's loosely modeled also after the old Phil Silver show on CBS. Mm-hmm. And you may know that show better by the name Sergeant Bilko.
Sergeant Bilko, yeah.
So, Sergeant Bilko in that is always looking for get-rich-quick scheme, and kind of the lieutenant is kind of the Eustace Peevly, in that, like, trying to always frustrated, and they're always kind of butting heads.
The well-meaning antagonist.
Yes.
Hey, look, I'm just trying to do my job.
So you're kind of borrowing from Yogi Bear, the kind of the storylines pull from the Phil Silver show. So they're taking two very well-known and established properties and turning them into this cartoon with the hope of success. And of course, to you got to make the Yogi Bear story modern for 1972.
Right.
So the bears live in a cave, but it's a very hip and modern cave. It's it's got stylish furniture. They've got Murphy beds. They have an oven, a pool table,
television,
all kinds of electronics, and then it could all be hidden with the flip of a switch, so that Peevly is none the wiser that they're living in this luxury. And every time he comes in, you just see three rugs.
Just a cave.
Yeah, it's a cave with three rugs on the floor.
Right.
So he thinks they're fine. They're bears. They don't need anything, and they're living otherwise. Of course, they also look different. So, the idea for that was they want to be Hanna-Barbera's idea is like, well, we want them to look more mainstream. They want them to like what the fads at the time. So Hair Bear is walking around in an orange vest, and he's got a big afro.
Yeah.
It almost looks like a lion's mane.
It does. Yeah, because it's blonde, and they dress like the anti-culture of the times, they don't care what people think of them, and they're going to look this way.
Yeah, so he's got that, and then you have the two other bears. You have Booby, who's a little fast-talking bear, and then he wears a striped shirt.
Yeah.
And then you have Square Bear, who's kind of the big muscle of the group, big tall bear. He's got the bucket head with the flowers on it.
Sure.
They're all dressed
you never see his eyes. His head's pulled down really low.
Yeah, and then when he takes the hat off, and then it's like fur kind of covers his eyes. But so it's got like again a modern twist on the Yogi Bear mythos. So, and then being in a zoo, you also have other creatures that you're going to interact with. There are I think we counted 9 other animals. We'll get to them when we get to the characters.
Right.
But, so, and they all have various levels of interaction with them. But essentially, Hair Bear, among the animals, is the leader.
The leader of the zoo.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the big ideas, and they tend to follow along, even though they don't always work out.
They don't work, and they don't know why they're following along. They just follow along.
Even the lion, who
he's should be the king.
Well, he keeps talking about how he's the king, except but the running joke with that, which is funny, is like, well, except don't tell my wife.
Yeah, I loved that.
One of the other kind of lasting things about this was the official theme song, which was written by Hoyt Curtin, which is "Help It's the Hair Bear Bunch," and it's very recognizable if you've heard it before. It's a very catchy little tune, and I remember that from being younger, and
Yeah,
kind
at
of
the Wonderland Zoo.
Yeah, it's a good theme song for a cartoon. It's nice.
It's catchy.
What's notable about this is that most of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, when you watch them, like you hear the same music running through. The music bed is the same. Like when you listen to Scooby-Doo, you hear this music, and you will hear that through all these other cartoons.
Yeah,
and it's just like you don't realize it until after, like, oh, why do I recognize that?
Sure.
The Hair Bear Bunch had its own compositions throughout. So and
its own laugh track, right?
There is a laugh track, yeah. So they didn't. It was a reheated idea, but they clearly invested into this, kind of thinking, okay, we think we've got something here. We've got a good idea. We know the Yogi Bear thing works. The animals and this is something that could really work. So the animation is crisp and looks good. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then the music, obviously they invested in the music. So they were not playing this off as this is a one-off. We're just filling time. This is something that we think may really catch on.
Right. They're really trying.
Yeah. And then the show only lasted 16 episodes. So after one season,
right, which was enough to get them into syndication.
Yeah. And
at that time.
Yeah. At that time. And then CBS canceled it because, in 1974, it doesn't really click with a young audience when you're trying to model yourself after a show from 1955 called The Phil Silver Show.
Yeah.
The kids aren't really, they're not hip to that.
20 years is a long time.
Yeah, it's not working anymore. It's like, great, those are old, kind of warmed over ideas.
Yeah.
And that was CBS's take on it. And so it got the axe. It didn't survive. But the Hair Bear Bunch did have a small resurgence in 1984 when it reappeared on cable. I don't know if you remember. I remember watching the USA Network, the USA Cartoon Express on weekday afternoons, where a lot of these old Hanna-Barbera, particularly the cartoons, would come back. But it got a resurgence, and actually suddenly a whole new generation of kids actually became aware of this. All of 16 episodes, but it kind of
found it again.
Yeah, it got a little bit of a cult following here.
Cool.
At the same time that the show came out, Hanna-Barbera, as they would do, they kind of sold out the license to sell comic books and merchandise it a little bit. So they got a series of 13 comic books put out by Gold Key Comics. Those were mostly original stories. There's a couple that were just adapted from the TV episodes. But in the comics, the antagonism between Hair Bear and Peevly is played down a lot. There's actually a bit more of a partnership, so they have a softer antagonism.
Yeah.
And there's at points where I think there's one story where we have Peevly trying to figure out where, since the bears do return to the zoo, they're like, oh, well, we'll just give them weekend passes instead. Like, fine, your guys are going to go away. Yeah. We're not going to keep chasing. You just go.
We know you'll
but
come
you got to
back.
come back.
Yeah.
You just got to make sure you come back. So it's like, it's just a little easier on everybody.
Right.
So kind of changes that whole dynamic
then
of the show a
can
little
get
bit.
some rest.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was, like I said, there's not a lot of history to this.
No.
For a one season shop. It did leave at least a small mark.
Well, it seemed to me like Hanna-Barbera got to a point where they could do that. They could produce a hit with not a lot of effort, and just like, hey, we know this is going to work. It's going to be like the Yogi Show, which was good, but we're going to update it a little bit. We're going to bring in some other things. We're going to spend some money on the music, and voila. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah, and you can tell when you go back and watch different episodes. Not just episodes, but different cartoons. So when we watched Brady Kids, the animation on that is terrible.
It's awful.
It's awful. But there are other Filmation projects at the same time that came out from the same time that looked brilliant.
Yeah.
And this is another case of that. So this is one they clearly invested in. The animation on this is really bright and crisp. There's no glaring errors. Like, you see, even with Scooby-Doo, which they were investing time in, errors slip through. Somebody's hair gets colored wrong for a couple frames.
Yeah.
There was none of it. This looked like top of the line animation.
Yeah, I remember I saw a blonde Shaggy once. Wait, did I just see? Yep, I did. But in this one, there wasn't a lot of things that I caught. The animation was good. Like the backgrounds were good, and the zoo enclosures were consistent. Mm-hmm. The background images were consistent. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they did a great job with this one. We had the 5 main characters. We have Hair Bear, Booby, and Square Bear, and Mr. Eustace Peevly, and Botch, who's the guy, main 5. And then there are other animals in the zoo. There's Funbo, the elephant. There's the lion we talked about.
Four-Face the lion.
Yeah. There's the giraffe. What was the giraffe's name?
There was Bananas, the gorilla.
Bananas the gorilla.
Well, of course, and there are three gorillas because then there's also Arnie and Gloria. There's a whole episode.
Gloria, and Bananas is in love with Gloria.
Well, there's Arnie the gorilla too. So there's a whole storyline about Arnie being in love with Gloria,
Right.
and and then you have Slicks, who's the fox.
Yep.
And Hippie the hippo. They clearly did not invest.
They didn't try hard on that name.
And of course then the very unique Pipsqueak the mouse.
Sure.
And the last one that actually had speaking lines was Beaks the pelican.
The pelican. Yeah.
Again, very brief appearance, but enough that he got a name.
Right.
So
well, he was involved in the car wash when they were trying to wash that thing off of the gorilla.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good voice actors in this one, though, for sure. Hair Bear, voiced by Dawes Butler. Mm-hmm. We keep coming back to him. He's great. Yeah. He was Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, Snagglepuss, Jinx the Cat, Wally Gator, Elroy Jetson, which I was surprised to find that out. I didn't put that together in the past. He was also Captain Crunch in the cereal commercials. Yeah, he was Captain Crunch, and he was Yogi Bear.
Yes.
And when I was watching this, it was really hard for me to separate Hair from Yogi because they sound almost exactly the same. It's just a little bit of a different vocabulary, but if you close your eyes, you could guess that's Yogi Bear.
Yeah, if you put him in a national park instead of a zoo,
it's Yogi Bear.
It's Yogi Bear with two sidekicks instead of one.
Well, and when he was Yogi Bear, when Dawes Butler was Yogi Bear, he worked with the voice of Boo Boo and Ranger Smith. That was the same voice actor by the name of Don Messick. Mm-hmm. So he worked with Don Messick on Yogi. You know, what I learned about Dawes going through this, I found some new information I didn't know about. Late in his career, he trained other voice actors about how to use facial expression and physical movement when you're creating the sound to give it more authenticity. So he was training other actors how to be voice actors. And one of his best students was Nancy Cartwright, who, of course, is Bart Simpson, which is the longest running cartoon in the history of the universe and probably will be forever. He, at his height in his career, had over 40 characters under his belt. When he passed away, it took 7 people to replace all the voices that he had been doing at that time. Square Bear was voiced by William Calloway. He was Clumsy Smurf. He was Beachhead in G.I. Joe. A lot of other voices on G.I. Joe. He worked with Christopher Collins on G.I. Joe, who was Cobra Commander. Also worked with Frank Welker and Peter Cullen on G.I. Joe. Booby Bear was voiced by Paul Winchell. Paul Winchell's got an amazing background. It's unbelievable. I read all this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I had to go find other sources to make sure I wasn't being trolled. So he was most famous for being a ventriloquist, which he was a phenomenal ventriloquist because I watched all these cartoons and I never saw Paul's lips move. He invented one of my favorite character voices of all times. He was the original Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, which Tigger's just great. He's one of my favorite cartoon characters. I love Tigger. But that voice is very unique and long-lasting, still being used today. He did all the Disney movies as Tigger. So naturally, as a voice actor, talented as Paul Winchell is, you're also capable of lots of other things, apparently. He was one of the inventors of the original artificial heart.
Oh, interesting.
I couldn't believe it. I'm like, that's the one I looked at. I'm like, wait. So you're a ventriloquist, you're doing cartoons, and on the side, you're inventing life-saving medical devices.
Oh, by the way,
I got this other thing I need to do.
Here's a heart.
He also invented the first battery-powered car. Huh. And apparently he was into aquaculture, and he was a world-renowned breeder of tilapia.
Well, as you do, right?
As you do, yeah. You know, what do you do? Oh, I'm a cartoon actor, and I invented the artificial heart, and I've got this battery-powered car thing might catch on in 40 years, and I'm big into fish.
Yeah, you guys hungry for some fish?
You want some tilapia? I got a whole bunch. But very successful career in that.
Renaissance man.
Yes, for sure. John Stevenson played Mr. Eustace P. Peevly. He was on Transformers. He was Thundercracker in Transformers. Of course, on Transformers, he worked with Peter Cullen and, you guessed it, Frank Welker.
Yeah.
Also with Christopher Collins. John Stevenson was also Professor Charles Xavier in X-Men and General Flagg on G.I. Joe. So, I mean, these guys have got huge resumes. They got all these guys together. Botch. Let's talk about Botch.
Botch is awesome.
Botch was voiced by Joe Ross. Most recognizable as Officer Gunther Tootie on Car 54, where I gotta say it like this. Car 54, where are you? He was also on a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, short-lived, called Hey, It's the King. Was on CB Bears, which was like a little mini-series they did, where he worked with Don Messick. And you heard me say it before, Botch's catchphrase on Car 54, Joe Ross's catchphrase on Car 54 was, ooh, ooh, ooh. And he used that constantly in this one, too. You know, ooh, ooh, is this when I get my promotion?
Mr. Peevly.
Yeah, ooh, ooh, Mr. Peevly, is this when I get my promotion? So it's funny because he's almost the same character
It's
on both shows.
Yeah, that shtick, he made a career out of that shtick.
Yeah,
Just
it worked
that
for
little,
him.
ooh, ooh, kind of that slightly bumbling kind of.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at him in person, you know, in Car 54, he's kind of this stocky guy, kind of this vacuous look on his face, like he's not really sure what's going on, but he's just there to enjoy it and try to help as best he can, which is exactly what Botch is in this Hair Bear bunch, which I really enjoyed. I loved that character. And in the cartoon, he's really big. You know, he's kind of the big dumb oaf. But he means well. Yeah. And he's just like lovable. You know, everybody must love Botch because why else would you keep him around, for one?
Well, and he's nice, and he clearly has a good working relationship with the animals, even though they don't necessarily, they know he's an idiot. And they know they can pull one over on him, but I mean, he's so...
But they're respectful to him. You know, they're not like come out to destroy him, but
they're
they
not
just...
mean to him or anything.
No, they're
It's
not.
Just kinda,
they have plenty of opportunity to, and they just...
And you get the sense if it wasn't for Peevly, he'd probably be fine with whatever they're doing. Like, okay, yeah, great.
All right,
yeah,
okay.
You guys go have fun.
Yeah. Will you pick me up a cheeseburger on the way back? Yeah, so he was my favorite character in the whole cartoon. I had a blast. You know, you loaned me you borrowed the DVDs from the library here. And I watched them all on DVD because I couldn't find it anywhere else, you know. Which I did return, and I thought I returned late, but you renewed it.
Yeah, I had you covered. We're good.
Yeah. Well, I saw this, 7-day rental. I'm like, Robert's going to have to pay like 50 cents in fines. I was going to pony up the money to cover the fine, but...
I know where you live. It's okay.
Yeah. I didn't want Bookman, the library cop, coming after you. So all these characters, all those five main actors have huge resumes, wildly successful. All connected to all the big names. But then when they all worked with Don Messick on other projects, you know, and then I'm watching the DVDs and the credits, additional voices, I see Don Messick's name. So Don Messick worked in Hair Bear Bunch with Dawes Butler, William Calloway, Paul Winchell, John Stevenson, and Joe Ross. So I tied Don Messick back to all these guys. It all comes
back to Don Messick one way or another.
Yeah, it has to.
Does.
We need to draw a chart where Don, the many...
he's like the sun. All these other actors just in his orbit.
Right. It'll look like the family tree from Game of Thrones. You read it 4 times and you still don't understand. But Don Messick's in the middle of all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I get the Don Messick part, but yeah. Well, and it's funny when you look at that because Dawes Butler and so he voiced Hair Bear, but he also actually voiced Furface the Lion.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes he did Furface the Lion. Paul Winchell actually did some of the.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Depending on the episode, he did the voice of Furface as well. Dawes Butler also did Bananas the Gorilla.
Oh yeah,
so
that's a great voice.
Yeah,
too.
kind of a up and down voice, but it's good. And I did want to make a point about when you talk about Stevenson coming on as Peevly. He was not the first choice to be Peevly. When they created the role, Barbera had the idea of, well, what about Joe Flynn?
Yeah,
who kind of played basically a similar character in McHale's Navy, the Captain Binghamton from that show. And So they brought Joe Flynn in and like, hey, read this part. And they're just completely underwhelmed by him. They're like, well, okay, that's not great. So they have Stevenson come in and we're like, well, that's great. That's Joe Flynn. But Joe Flynn didn't sound enough like Joe Flynn, so Stevenson's going to be it. So it's like they created for this guy, and he couldn't do it.
We need the discount Joe Flynn because the real Joe Flynn isn't good enough. For
Give us
Joe
an imitation Joe Flynn. Perfect, nailed it. That's it. That's what we need.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah, I just thought that was so funny that they like you never know. You can create it for a guy and it just doesn't work out.
Doesn't come out. Yeah,
but in this case, I mean, Stevenson did a great job with Peevly.
Yeah, he was funny. Because he's kind of the straight man, you know, gets a little frustrated, but
he's exasperated by everybody.
Yes,
and he's he's just constantly worn down. He's like,
come on.
Even when things worked out with it for him, he's just like, I don't know to be happy or angry. I don't know.
I feel like I have no control over what just happened, but it wound up being fine.
and part of it's because of dealing with the Bears. Part of it's just because Botch is there, and Botch is going to screw something up.
It's like he's responsible for the animals and also for Botch.
Yeah, and it's funny because you think reading it just sounds like, well, that's kind of a stupid idea, but it worked. They did it so well because Botch's habit was always to like, Peevly would say something and like, yeah, you bears do this. Like he'd repeat whatever Peevly said, and Peevly's like, Botch, what was it? If I wanted an echo, I would have hired the Grand Canyon.
Yes,
he's just like constantly like, Botch, just stop. He's got some joke for it all the time, and it's just like his exasperation comes out, and it comes out in different ways, but it's always so funny. It's just like really, really clever the way they write it.
Yeah. It's almost like he's his little brother, and he just like a tag along. There's nothing he can do about it. He's here. He's going to annoy me. And sometimes Peevy would look at Botch just like, are you kidding me? That's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to do. It was super fun. Well written, great actors. Mm-hmm. I had some favorite episodes. Do you want to talk about some of the episodes?
Absolutely.
And I found a big plot hole that I want your opinion on.
Nice.
So, the general premise is, as we talked about, are these three bears. They want to come and go as they please, which normally they do, but they've got to sneak out way. They find a tunnel. They fly out, use balloons, distract Peevly, and just walk out. Or they jump on this invisible motorcycle that Square Bear can conjure, which first couple times I saw it, I'm like, well, that sucks. That's dumb. But then you get to love it. Like, this is great.
Because it's just so random. He just jumps up in the middle of the air, lands on this invisible thing, kicks his foot down, and goes. And, it's just like, right.
And the two of them just hop on and ride. It's just hilarious. The first couple times you're like, oh, that's lame. Yeah, but then it's like, I love it. Yeah. Every time they get on the motorcycle, I go, yes! Here's a motorcycle, the invisible 3-person motorcycle, which apparently they carry with them wherever they go.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's invisible, so it's apparently light, too.
Just show up. Yeah. Very light. Couple of episodes that I loved. I loved episode 11 with the closed circuit television. So they're supposed to put cameras in the cave to keep an eye on them, but the bears trick them into thinking the camera's upside down by standing on their heads, and then they move their mouths without making any noise so that Peevly thinks the sound isn't working, and that all backfires. But then they start playing music, and they're really good, and other people hear their music, and a bunch of people show up and want to sign the Hair Bears to a contract.
Yeah, it goes from being a closed circuit to they
broadcast
a television show.
Yes. Which was great, and people loved them. And then Peevy sees, oh, there's an opportunity for me here. So he tries to become their manager. And it reminded me of the scene in That Thing You Do, where the manager's in the van, just, here, we're going to sign this because we're going to be a band now. But he gets the Hair Bears to sign him as his manager by threatening to send them to the North Woods if they don't sign.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we're signing because we don't want to go to the North Woods. That episode was a riot. The whole idea that they knew the cameras were there, they were screwing with them on the camera, and then they become this sensation on actual television.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the few episodes where, so you mentioned the zoo superintendent really early on. So John Stevenson voiced him as well.
Yeah.
So
he makes an appearance in this one.
Yeah, he does, because he discovers that they're on TV and happens to tune in when they on the day that they talk Peevly into doing imitation, doing
imitation of the
superintendent. And he does one to the superintendent, and that's like generally the superintendent, when he shows up, it shows up at the end, and generally whatever madcap adventure has gone on, it works out in everybody's favor, because the superintendent's like, oh, this is great, I'm so glad. Peevly gets accommodation, and the bear, and Peevly doesn't like, well, okay, I don't know if I should punish the bears, or just like, okay, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few episodes, this may be the only episode where whatever the bears did ended up resulting in Peevly getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Because he was imitating the superintendent. The superintendent shows up and takes him away, presumably to punish him.
Yeah, he was imitating his boss.
Yeah. But that's the only time where you ever see that kind of negative interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's always just kind of he's congratulating him for doing something.
Right.
And people's like, oh, okay. He thought he's in trouble, but he's like, oh, no, this is great for the zoo. The great publicity for the zoo.
Sure.
Great job, Peevly. Like, oh, okay. And of course, Hair Bear being the smart one, always when he's quick before anything can happen, he's like, oh, superintendent, do you see what Mr. Peevly did?
Yeah, he's giving the credit
and
to
he gives
Mr.
him
Peevly.
the credit, so he kind of avoids
getting in
any
trouble. You can't punish me now. I just gave you the credit. I just got you accommodation from your boss.
Yeah, and that's where that Peevly frustration comes. Like, come on, I had you captured, and now you've turned it and made it good for me, and now
I have to congratulate. I have to reward you now. Yeah, that one was fun. Episode 7, I'll Zoo You Later. That's when they escape and they wind up in a cabin in the national forest and find out that it's a hideout for 2 bank robbers. And the bank robbers are awesome. I mean, they come in and they're like the gangsters from the 20s. There's like, it reminded me of, I won't know his name, but the gangster always showed up in the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like the 20s with the zoot suit and the hat pulled way down low and the cigarette hanging out. I'd swear it was him. It was just they stole him or whatever, who stole who, but it was that guy.
Yeah.
And then his big dumb oaf partner in crime are in this cabin, and the bears are hiding, pretending to be a bear rug, pretending to be the picture on the wall and the lamp. And they start hiding the money because the cops are coming, so they're shoving it in the mouth of the bear that's pretending, or Hair Bear's pretending to be a bearskin rug. I just laughed out loud because I just thought that was hilarious. And then episode 12, I loved episode 12 too, where they fake an injury. The bear who came to dinner to evade being sent to the national forest. And Square Bear recuperates in Mr. Peevly's house so he doesn't get in trouble with the zoo superintendent. Like, why is this bear injured?
Yeah.
So he takes him away from the zoo. But then Mr. Peevly finds out what's going on and tries to expose his fake injury. There's just the idea of like, oh, I'll just take this bear home while it recuperates. I worked at an Association of Zoos and Aquariums accredited facility for a long time. And the stuff that went on in this zoo made me laugh because I'm like, oh, there's no way that could ever happen. But so it gave me a little different experience watching the craziness that was going on with these animals, and really just made me smile.
Yeah.
That, oh, that must be what a zoo is like.
Well, I love I like those episodes, the ones that really stuck out to me. So I like the idea of I thought they did a good job of setting the whole tone of the series in the very first episode, where they it's Keep Your Keeper, where they drive Peevly away. They get him to go on a vacation, indefinite vacation.
Yeah, they give him a disease, right?
They make him think he has a disease.
Yeah.
So he's seeing bears everywhere, and so he just kind of...
And he's got polka dots or something. Yeah.
So he disappears, so he goes off, and he gets replaced by this giant muscular guy called Mr. Grunch. Yeah. And he is
like
just
a drill sergeant.
He's a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
And he is just like, all right, having none of it.
Yeah.
And so suddenly they realize how they actually didn't have a bad
This
deal
may
with,
have been a mistake.
Yeah. So they have to go back and try and...
Well, he had zoolerium.
Yes.
That was the disease that came up. Zoolerium.
And he needed to take, 6 months off?
6 months off, yeah.
So he goes off to this resort and lay on a beach.
And he loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I love about Peevly, as he goes to the beach, he's still wearing his same zoo. He's still wearing his zoo. Everywhere he goes, no matter what, he's wearing the zookeeper outfit.
Right. Even laying on the beach.
He can't let it go.
No.
But I love the character, that whole the dynamic with Grunch, and just how kind of the way they're animated, like they're like, they're
afraid of this guy.
like this isn't a good.
Well, then they convince Peevly that he's got another disease for being on vacation too long, and then he needs to come back to work.
No, he misses the zoo.
He misses the zoo so much.
Back.
Yeah, he came back.
Yeah, and he does. And of course, then they do enough to make Grunch look like a moron.
Sure.
To the superintendent, so the superintendent is eager to bring Peevly back.
Yeah, let's get this guy fired.
Yeah.
This is not working out for us.
But it was kind of, it was a really, really good way to kind of set up the series going forward with, really establishing that dynamic between the Bears and Peevly.
Yeah.
And really letting that
it's almost a symbiotic relationship with these two. Like, hey, Peevly kind of lets us get away with what we want to do, but we'll follow some of his rules, make sure he doesn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another one that I really liked was the fourth episode, which is Bridal Boo Boo. Part of the ridiculousness of this is what I liked about it, which is the Bears decide, well, Peevly would be better if he'd be happier if he had a wife.
Yes.
So let's just get him a woman.
He'd spend less time focusing on us if he had a woman to deal with.
Get him a woman, so they actually create a profile and put him onto a dating site, and this woman shows up who basically looks like a female botch.
Yes.
It's just big, huge, and kind of like very bossy woman shows up.
Yeah.
And it's like, you Peevly? And he's like, what? It's like, all right, you look different than your picture, but okay. And she's like, we're going to get married on Saturday. And in the meantime, she's moving in, and she's like, she's going to take over the zoo. And of course, kind of like a little bit like Grunch, like this big, really intimidating woman shows up, and she's like
stout woman,
and she is bossing the bears, all the animals around. They're like, no, what's happening? And Peevly just is kind of,
what's going on?
He doesn't, and he's like, okay, yeah, well, he's like intimidated by her. He's like, just the whole ridiculousness of this woman. She's like, all right, and she's like, I think the first thing she does, she's like, she names the date, and then she's like, I'm putting curtains up in the window. Like, really? And then she has all the animals line up, and so she starts dressing.
And Peevly's just helpless,
and he's just kind of like following her around, like, all right. But yeah, it's funny. It's just like this. I mean, she really looks like a female botch. Botch with the dress and hair.
Right.
And
for sure,
it's funny.
Yeah,
but and actually, one other one that I like actually is a moment that I liked, and kind of when we talk about Paul Winchell doing the voice of Bobby Bear. So Paul Winchell, being the ventriloquist, one of his characters was he kind of spoke this gibberish. He would kind of speak quickly and kind of...
You didn't hear every word.
Yeah, and he didn't say every word. He would actually just kind of make him sound like he was saying a lot. He would just kind of say this gobbledygook.
Yeah.
Which
is hard to do.
Yeah, and he brought that over into the Bobby Bear character. And at times, I thought it worked really well. I don't think it worked all the time. It kind of felt like it got old here and there, but
when he was doing that, though, it seemed to me like Booby was the one who had a good head on his shoulders. Even though he was speaking gibberish, it was like he's calm and collected, and I think he makes sense. Well, I don't know what he said, but I agree with it.
And that's just it. It was the episode the Bear Who Came to Dinner, which was episode 12. During that. Bobby pleads the Bear's case that Square Bear needs to stay in the main office because he cites the case of the 1898 of Grizz L. Bear versus Timbuk Zoo. And the way he said it is he's like, where the tray fell on his back, and the zookeeper, and he's kind of saying all this, and they krilled him, threw away the key, and he's like, of course he's singing this kind of slightly voice, and he's kind of adding this gobbledygook in between, so he's saying, it sounds like he's saying all this really important stuff, and he's clearly making it up.
Yeah.
and it's garbled, but it's enough that, as you said, it sounds like he sounds competent, like he knows, and they're like, oh, okay.
He just sounds competent.
Yeah, if there's a legal case involved, then we probably should just kind of follow along. So
let's listen to the bear.
So so they, as a character trait, they use that to kind of move the plot along when they need to. Like, okay, just kind of get people on board, like when they're trying to get the other animals on board. He's like, right, isn't that right, Bobby? And then Bobby was like, well, yeah. He kind of give this long nonsense explainer, and then everybody's just kind of Yeah, they don't want to sound like they're stupid and they don't understand him.
Sure.
Even though none of them understand him because he's not saying anything.
Because Hair Bear's the charismatic leader. He's got this big plan, but all the other animals don't understand it because he's this genius.
Yes.
So Booby would explain it in normal, layman's terms, which ironically weren't terms at all. But then they'd all buy it. Okay.
Yeah, well, Hare said it, and then he's backing it up, and I guess I don't understand it. But if they're both saying it's true, then it must be true.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting the way they kind of use it. It's understandable. Well, and then that also the no space like home, where they get in a rocket and they go up to Mars.
Yeah, and when they landed on Mars, it reminded me of the scene from A Trip to the Moon, like the first movie ever, how the rocket lands like horizontally and slides into the rock. I'm like, that's kind of cool.
But they get out and they meet this race of aliens, and Booby starts speaking his gibberish, and the aliens understand him perfectly.
Yes, exactly.
It's like that's their language, is this gibberish.
And when they talk back, it is that gibberish. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. Maybe bears are from space.
So I mean, I thought they made good use of that kind of that character, that quirk, and again using something that Paul Winchell did so well, that he was so effective with. They just kind of like, all right, let's utilize that and kind of help propel story arcs along. And
that one was great because they elect Peevly as the leader. These aliens elect him as leader, and he's sitting on the throne. And then the bears find out that they elect a new leader every day.
Yeah,
and they put the old leader in a glass box. So they're like, this isn't going to work out.
And then of course Peevly's the leader, and he's done with Botch. At this point, he's like, I don't need you anymore.
Yeah,
and
I'm the king.
He's just just trashing on Botch, and Botch is like, what?
What happened to you?
And then the day ends, and Peevly gets put in a glass box.
Yes.
And they make Botch their leader, and Botch's like, no, I'm the leader. They're like, didn't you see what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. I'm the leader now.
Right.
It's like, that incompetence of Botch, but he's like, hey, I got my promotion.
Finally. Ooh, I'm the leader. Oh, yeah. Some of these episodes were just incredibly entertaining and fun.
Yeah.
And it just didn't make sense, but I didn't care because it was entertaining. It wasn't trying to be more than it needed to be. It was like, this is entertaining. We're doing this to entertain. Mm-hmm. This is a funny story or a funny situation. It almost reminded me of, Seinfeld's claim to fame is a show about nothing. Mm-hmm. This is a cartoon. The very tiny bit is there's bears that like to get out of the zoo once in a while.
Yeah.
That's how you explain the show.
Yeah.
But there's all these other things that go on that make it fun to watch. But there's no real plot. It's a cartoon about nothing.
Yeah, I mean, the basic premise is the same, but every episode is distinctly different.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like they're doing the same thing over and over.
They're not tying plot lines together or anything. It's just...
No, and they don't repeat themselves. It's always something different, and I think... as it turns out, I think 16 episodes is probably the right number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they would have had to start repeating capers. Mm-hmm. Or how many different ways can you leave the zoo?
And you could see it getting old if this kept going on in like 30 episodes of this. Yeah. Then it would start to be a grind. But I thought, this worked really well.
Well, remember, that was your comment about Tom and Jerry. It's like, Tom and Jerry was great. Mm-hmm. But, all right, enough of this. Yeah. I've had too much of this already.
100 plus is a bit much.
Yeah, exactly. One episode episode 10, Panda Pandemonium. Mm-hmm. The panda reminded me of the little pandas in the Brady Kids. It was like this tiny little panda that could hide under a table. And it was just like, oh, it's that damn panda.
Don't talk. Don't talk.
Please don't talk.
Don't speak.
Please don't talk in Chinese gibberish. Please don't. Thank God he didn't. But he was headed to the St. Louis Zoo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, oh no, here we go. But it didn't happen, thank God.
And he didn't fly a spaceship that looked like a golf ball, so
no.
we're in good shape there. One other one that I wanted to mention is actually I have a couple of them marked. Kling Klong versus the Masked Marvel, which is, again, kind of just really ridiculous on its face. The idea where they're
going to win $500.
Yeah. So yeah, Hair Bear hears on the radio that there's this contest of any wrestler who can defeat the Masked Marvel or can last a minute in the ring with the Masked Marvel.
Yeah.
Gets $500, and so he's like, of course, Hair Bear be like, he's not going to do it, but he's going to find somebody who will.
Yeah.
And they look and realize that Bananas, the gorilla, could do that. I mean, he's a gorilla.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just who's going to beat a gorilla in a ring?
Exactly.
Granted, Bananas is not very violent or aggressive or
quite the opposite.
Yeah, he's
a cuddle bear.
Yeah, and he's just kind of a doofus.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you want me to what now? And so
I'm glad they didn't do bear wrestling because that could have got ugly.
So they gotta train him how to be at least moderately aggressive to be able to stay in the ring with the Masked Marvel.
Yeah.
And then of course the Masked Marvel in the meantime gets the measles, and nobody knows that, but Peevly and Botch find out.
Yeah.
And then they talk Botch into become the Masked Marvel. Botch, this big monstrous guy who, again, not aggressive, he's just kind of a big doofus. And it ends up with the two Bananas. I keep wanting to call him Bubbles. It's like he's like at Neverland. It's Bananas and Botch are in the ring together, and
neither one of them want to be there.
And they're in these masked outfit, and it's such a silly thing, but I just thought it was actually really clever and really funny.
Right.
Yeah. The circumstances are so ridiculous that it works.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I found a plot hole in this whole Hair Bear thing. In episode 11, you talked about the closed circuit TV, mm-hmm. Peevly threatens to send them to the National Forest or the North Woods. In episode 12, the bears fake the injury so they don't have to go to the National Forest because they don't want to go there. But in episode 7, when they escape the zoo, where do they go?
The National Forest.
The National Forest. Like, if this is such a horrible place, you'll do anything to avoid going there. Once you escape, that's where you go. So, which is it? Do you want to be in the forest or not?
Well, remember they went there first before they were being threatened. They threatened later.
Sure.
And maybe it was actually after that fact that, like, if
after
we go
that,
back,
like, no way.
We're going to be threatened at gunpoint by these robbers.
Yeah. Maybe we won't go back there again. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably different knowing that they're going by their own volition as opposed to being forced to go. But,
yeah. They're going to dart them and tag them and ship them up to the forest. They don't want that.
Yeah, it was just a good cartoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
just kind of top to bottom. It was just the animation was slick, the voice acting was fantastic, and the stories were all unique and different. And yeah, I just thought it was enjoyable.
The one thing I thought about, going through this when it was, similar to the Phil Silver show, it kind of reminded me of Hogan's Heroes too, and McHale's Navy. They're all that similar type of. You got this group of captives. They're in the zoo or they're in the prison camp or they're in the Navy or whatever. But it's okay because we can pull things over on our boss once in a while and it's fine.
Yeah.
And the boss is, trying to do his best, but he's got this bumbling sidekick that, Colonel Clink, who's usually complicit in what the prisoners are doing, but doesn't understand that he's complicit. I just thought that was fun to see that kind of show in cartoon, which made it enjoyable because I loved McHale's Navy and Hogan's Heroes. Those are great shows, but this reminded me of that.
Yeah, what I liked about it too is that generally, especially like you look at those early animal cartoons that Hanna-Barbera did, but the animal always got the upper hand. He's always smarter, always did kind of got away with it in a way, and that doesn't happen here. Hair Bear half the time his schemes don't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It fails.
It doesn't work. Yeah. And it's actually just the half time it's Peevly's intervention that actually prevents it from going worse, or like that actually saves it. It's like, oh, okay, great. And you can either pan it off on Peevly, and then the superintendent shows up like, great job, Peevly. Look at all the attention the zoo is getting. Yes. and Hair Bear is like, oh yeah, well it was all Peevly's, Mr. Peevly's doing, and again that we'd mentioned it earlier, that kind of exasperation, but it was just kind of clever. So he didn't always win, and his schemes, like they'd realize, like the raffle, they do a raffle, to raffle away the ownership of the zoo. I mean, obviously not true, but they convince, use Bobby again to convince, this can happen.
Yeah.
So and the Hair Bear fixes the raffle so that he becomes the zookeeper. Yeah. And so Peevly, of course, is smart enough to realize, like, this isn't a thing. Yeah. That's not a thing. And Botch's like, ooh, Mr. Peevly. And he's like, no, it's fine, Botch. Just watch what happens. Yeah. And at that point, he just kind of like lets it go. And
turns out running a zoo is harder than Hair thought.
Within 24 hours, Hair Bear is like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. And then he realizes that. So, I mean, his scheme failed, but the ensuing hijinks is that he's on to that. He realizes that Peevy knows that he has, he's not really the superintendent or the zookeeper. And so then he tries to play it off, kind of, and it's like this little cat and mouse back and forth. But again, that like not everything works. Nope. And he as smart as he is, he's not the smartest person on the cartoon at given points. And
well, I identified with Hair in that one because, I worked at the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium for a long time in Dubuque. I would always tease the animal care people. I'm like, we should get a panda or a koala or something, because I was the marketing director. I'm like, that would be amazing. Wouldn't that be great, to have something like that? And the director of animal husbandry looked at me and said, John, if we get a panda, we won't need a marketing director. And I said, oh, that's a bad idea then. So when Hair Bear pulled off that raffle idea, I'm like, oh, that seems familiar to me.
Well, here I would think that your response would be like, well, just make sure the panda's dumb enough that he can't be marketing director.
Exactly. When's the last time you saw a panda type? Pandas don't know anything about typing.
They're fat and lazy. Come on.
They'd eat you out of house and home. So, let's maybe do good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of it, but I mean, I thought I was really impressed with the animation in this, especially with the some of the knock on Hanna-Barbera, especially through the 70s, because they're cranking out so much content. Yeah, some of it, not everything was great, not everything was necessarily good,
right?
But this was, they clearly put an A-team on this one. Yeah. Really, it looked really sharp. The colors popped, and added with some really great voice work and some very clever and distinct storylines. I mean, I thought it just...
And they used that technique from Scooby-Doo where only the part that was moving needed to be redrawn, so they all had like a line on their neck or something that where if they were talking, they were just redrawing the head and not the entire body, which made production a little easier. So I recognized that Hanna-Barbera trick throughout, and they used it well. But yeah, I agree with you. The animation was great, and the colors were really good and consistent. It's a well done cartoon.
Yeah, and the animation I think holds up really well now. I mean, it looks, like I said, it looks really clean, and it has a very modern, not a modern style, but just like in terms of, it's not grainy, it's not. I mean, it just looks really nice,
right?
And actually, it helps that a lot of the jokes actually landed effectively.
Yeah, and they hold up.
Yeah, that's not a small thing, given some of the shows we've watched.
Yes, exactly. we've learned how difficult it can be. Yeah, for me, the good for me was that just how entertaining it was. It never got stale for me. I always looked forward to, okay, what kind of scheme are they going to use this time? And then when they launched their plan, I'm like, okay, how is this going to fail? What is going to go wrong that they're just going to want to go back into their cave? I really enjoyed that part of it, that it was well written and entertaining.
Yeah, and just clever. Just a good, solid cartoon.
Yeah.
So with that good, what bad did you find?
The bad, I felt like it was, it was hard for me to ignore the fact that this was kind of a ripoff of the Yogi Bear show. It was built off of that. I was able to get past that, but in the back of my head the whole time, like, this is the recycled plot of Yogi Bear, except for trying to steal Picnic Basket. They're trying to escape the zoo.
Yeah.
And the ranger is Peevly, and, and even the same voice made it harder to ignore that this was really based on Yogi Bear.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had, find something bad, that was it.
Yeah, I think the only thing the two things I guess I did mention, Boopie's voice at times like, all right, I'm kind of over this.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, when it was effective, it kind of really helped drive the plot or kind of push the story along. I was fine with it, but there are times where he's just kind of, this seems unnecessary.
Sure.
Yeah. We don't need to go through this kind of gibberish dialogue.
Are you
now.
filling stuff?
Yeah, this isn't really working so well
sure,
for me in this instance. But I mean, it's few and far between. It was more often than not. I thought they used it effectively.
Yeah.
The other thing was there's maybe one or two episodes that felt like they were thin. Like, all right, we're kind of stretching this one.
Yeah.
So in those instances,
Sure.
it like the one with Arnie the girl in love with Gloria.
Oh yeah.
If they'd cut that in half, do an 11-minute episode, do two 11-minute episodes, do a different storyline for the second half.
Yeah.
I think that
that plot wasn't enough
brevity.
to fill a hole.
Brevity would have sold that. Would made that one work really well.
Yeah.
So I mean, one or two episodes, if they had kind of just trimmed them a little bit and just done those like kind of quicker, more that Yogi Bear, which Yogi Bear was 7 minutes each.
Right.
Go a little bit longer, go 11 minutes, an 11-minute, and then you've got your full 22-minute episode, and you move on.
Right.
So I thought, but again, it's ultimately a minor quibble because I mean even though they felt stretched, they're still entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But and there's only 2 episodes probably that when I go back and look at it, I'm like, yeah, okay.
Won't watch
But,
that one again.
yeah.
I agree with you. I think it was sometimes they were a little, I don't want to say stale, but yeah, I guess thin is the right word that you used. And some of them were fantastic. And it made me overlook these other ones. Like, okay, this one isn't as great, but I can't wait to see what's next. Because they've done some good ones and there's going to be more good ones.
Yeah.
For the ugly, if that panda would have talked, that would have been it.
John would have thrown his TV out the window and it would have been the end of it.
This dang panda.
Done with this podcast.
Yeah, I'm done with this.
And we're not watching Pandemonium.
No. So I it was just good, wholesome entertainment. I mean, there wasn't even any, implied adult situations. There was nothing like that. There was no real violence. It wasn't even slapstick violence. No. I mean, it was just fun.
Yeah, and you didn't even have the casual bigotry that was still around in
that time.
Yeah, that was not uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
There was none of that.
No.
I think it helps that you're just in a zoo.
Yeah.
So you're kind of avoiding any other people. It's really a handful of humans at best.
Yep.
So it's all the animals, and none of them were. I mean, they're all just played very straight in terms of their caricatures, and I did not find anything really ugly, which is
no. They did pretend.
What was a story in and of itself?
What was the one where they went to a resort and wound up in the horse race, and they entered the zebra in the horse race?
As a horse, and nobody realized it was a zebra,
or a bear riding it. But he got into the hotel pretending to be a Arab sheik.
Yes,
but when they did that, there was none of the stereotypes of an Arab or an Arab sheik.
They didn't fake a voice. They
did nothing other than put the costume on.
Yeah,
or change it. Change his disguise.
Mm-hmm.
So they went in disguise, but there were none of the other tropes that you would expect to see from that time period. So they even handled that well, I thought. So I don't really have an ugly for this one.
No, it turned out to be a solid cartoon. So where would your ranking come in on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well,
or 0 to 10 as you kick the floor out from this last episode.
I did give it 0.0. If you haven't heard the Brady episode, go listen to it because it's fun but ugly and bad. I want to give this. I'm going to give this one a 9 because I really enjoyed it. I think it was an appropriate amount of episodes. I think if they had, like you had mentioned, if they had gone further, it would have gotten stale. They would have been pushing me, and the panda didn't talk. And
that's 2 points right there.
Yeah, and it reminded me of my all-time favorite television show, Seinfeld, where it was just a kind of a cartoon about nothing.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And the actors were awesome. So, yeah, I'm going to give it a 9.
Yeah, so I'll behind the curtain quick. I have like a 5-point criteria. Five different criteria that I kind of, when I'm looking at these. So one is flat, is it entertaining? Is this an entertaining cartoon? This is definitely an entertaining cartoon. This worked.
Yeah.
How was the animation? And the animation was great. We talked about the voice acting being great. How were the stories? Like overall story, does it work? Does it kind of, again, it kind of ties the entertaining, but that. And then rewatchability. Sure. And the rewatchability is a hard one, especially when you're just sitting down, like as we're doing, we're just kind of plowing through a series.
Right.
And episode after episode.
Super binge.
And I went back and rewatched about 4 or 5 of these episodes. I watched all 16 and I want to go back and watch this one again.
Yeah.
Like I want to watch. Yeah. So there's like 4 or 5 I went back and like that. Yeah. Again. So I ended up coming up with like my total being 8.
8?
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, and I debated a 9. Like, do I go to 5? Do I go up to 9? And like, I kind of with my scale, like, no, this is a good solid cartoon.
Yeah. Well, I also think there's a bounce effect from how bad our last cartoon was to see something good. It's like, oh, maybe they get a little boost because comparing it to the Brady Kids,
Yeah, well,
this
and
was fun.
And we didn't mention. So I mean, I did mention the opening song. I think that when you've got an opening song, like that works. I'm willing to sit through that every time. Where the Brady Kids, I'm like, oh my, it's just like nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Just seeing the pictures pop up, even if you only listen to
Skip
it.
30 seconds. Skip 30 seconds.
And then or the Hulk Hogan, where the only reason it's good is because you're watching people biting on the concrete.
Every time,
just as you're taking a drink of water, that was perfect.
I watched the Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling intro just to see that lady fall down.
Yeah, that was
every time.
Yeah. I didn't care about the rest of it, but just like watching people bite it on as they're chasing after Hulk Hogan. That's not the reason you want that.
No, watch it for all the wrong reasons.
This Hair Bear is a really good. It's a really good theme.
Awesome.
It's a good theme song, good intro.
Yep.
And I just really liked that. And the ones that we watched also, I didn't realize that they had bumpers for their commercials.
Oh yeah.
So like it was always like they'd actually animated like these little 15-second bumpers, kind of like, oh, we'll be right back after these, and like, hey, we're back for the hair. It was just kind of silly little things.
Booby would talk in gibberish, and Square would go, "What did he say?" And here it's like, he said, "There's more fun and adventure right after this."
So yeah, just like that was like a nice little touch too. To make it just a little bit nicer than anything else. So no, I thought it was a good cartoon. That's a strong 8.
Yeah, it was good.
Unfortunately, anybody who's listening and wants to watch it, it's right now. The only place that you and I could find it was on a DVD set,
right?
That Hanna-Barbera has released, and it is still available. You can find it online.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, and you can buy, I think, episodes through the iTunes store as well, or you can buy the DVD set.
Yeah, and the quality of the DVD was good.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. It looked fantastic. So yeah.
Great. So what do we have next?
Next, we jump ahead 10 years into the 80s, and we get back into the greeting card company craze, and we take a look at the shirt tails.
Shirt tails. Fun.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that will be hopefully better than the last greeting card one we went through. So. Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside. So that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter at Toon Talk Guys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.